The courtroom was already tense. Reporters lined the benches, murmuring quietly as they prepared for a high-profile ethics hearing involving a federal contractor accused of influence peddling. Judge Edward Chen presided with his usual air of calm authority, seemingly unfazed by the political implications swirling around the case. Then the doors at the back swung open. Pam Bondi entered without fanfare, but her presence stopped everything. Dressed in a sharp navy suit and carrying a thick folder of sealed documents, she walked past security without saying a word. A few spectators gasped quietly. No one had expected her to show up, especially not unannounced. Judge Chen raised an eyebrow. "Miss Bondi," he said slowly, "I was under the impression you were no longer involved in this case." Pam didn't flinch. "You were misinformed, Your Honor," she said, voice steady. "What I have here could change everything." The room buzzed. Judge Chen tapped his gavel once. "Approach the bench." Pam did. She handed him the folder. "This is sealed evidence, just cleared for submission by the Office of Inspector General, this morning." Chen opened it, eyes scanning the first page. His expression froze. A beat passed. Then another. "What is this?" he asked quietly, too quietly. Pam looked him dead in the eye. "Something you probably never expected would see the light of day." He sat back, silent. The gallery leaned in. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Judge Chen said 6 words that sent a shockwave through the courtroom: "I'm recusing myself." Effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke after a blast. "I'm recusing myself." Effective immediately. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom, followed by stunned silence. Even the court clerk's hand trembled as she reached to stop the recorder. No one had anticipated this. Not the press, not the attorneys. Certainly not the defendant. Pam Bondi didn't flinch. She stood tall, hands folded, waiting. Judge Chen carefully closed the folder, his face unreadable. "The contents of this evidence," he said slowly, "have implications beyond this case. Beyond this courtroom." "You're absolutely right," Pam replied. "And every moment this trial continues under your supervision puts the entire judicial process at risk." One of the attorneys, clearly caught off guard, stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, recusal at this stage." "On what grounds?" Chen ignored him. Instead, he looked directly at Pam. "You're forcing my hand." "No, Judge," she said, her tone steely. "The truth is forcing your hand." A beat of silence passed before he spoke again, this time to the clerk. "Call in the Chief Judge. Notify the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel. This bench is no longer mine." Gasps. One reporter dropped her pen. Before leaving the bench, Chen looked once more at Pam Bondi. There was something behind his eyes: fear, anger, resignation. "I warned them this would happen if they brought you in." Pam stepped back and said coldly, "Then they should have listened." As Chen exited through the side door, murmuring erupted into open confusion. But Pam wasn't done. She turned to face the courtroom. "Now," she said clearly, "let's talk about what he tried to hide." Every eye in the courtroom turned to Pam Bondi. The judge was gone. The chain of command had shifted. And standing in his place, metaphorically and almost literally, was Pam, holding the sealed evidence that had just forced a federal judge off the bench. She placed the folder on the prosecution's table and looked to the new acting judge who had just entered in a hurry, Chief Judge Valerie Knox, known for her no-nonsense style and bipartisan backbone. "I'll make this simple," Pam began. "Contained in this evidence are communications, emails, recorded calls, and financial logs, linking Judge Edward Chen to undisclosed coordination with the defense's lead counsel." The room froze again. Even Judge Knox looked shaken. "Are you alleging misconduct?" Pam didn't blink. "No. I'm confirming it." The materials have already been verified by the Office of the Inspector General and cross-checked against Treasury records. Wire transfers. Off-the-books meetings. Coordinated stalling tactics. Defense counsel erupted, "This is outrageous. She's not even an official party to the case." Pam cut in sharply. "Correct. But I was brought in by the Senate Judiciary Committee 3 weeks ago under executive authority to observe irregularities. What I found went deeper than any of us imagined." Judge Knox gestured for order. Bondi continued. "This wasn't about helping the defendant. It was about protecting people far more powerful than him, across 2 agencies and 1 judiciary seat." A reporter in the back whispered, "She's naming names, isn't she?" Pam nodded as if hearing him. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second folder. "This contains a list of officials linked to this network," she said. "And before today ends, you're going to hear every name." You could hear a pin drop. Judge Knox leaned forward cautiously. "Ms. Bondi, you understand the gravity of what you're asserting?" Pam opened the second folder and placed it gently on the table like it was radioactive. "Fully. These individuals weren't just adjacent to the corruption, they orchestrated it." She slid the first page out and handed it to the clerk. "I request this document be entered into the record under sealed status, pending DOJ review." The clerk hesitated, then looked to Judge Knox, who gave a single nod. The courtroom held its collective breath. Judge Knox scanned the first few names on the list, and stopped cold. Her lips tightened. "I recognize some of these names." "So will the public," Pam said. Knox looked up. "Are you aware that at least 2 of these individuals currently sit on federal oversight boards?" "Yes. And one of them was confirmed less than 6 months ago, after giving a personal recommendation for Judge Chen during his retention hearing." The reporter's pen scratched madly, eyes darting between the front and back of the courtroom. Phones were silently raised, recording every moment. One journalist whispered to another, "Is she going to say who's at the top of the list?" Pam didn't need to hear the question. She stepped toward the bench and spoke directly to Judge Knox. "I'll say it right now, under oath, and with full awareness of the consequences, the top name on this list is Deputy Attorney General Leonard Epps." Gasps echoed through the room like a thunderclap. Judge Knox sat back, stunned. Pam's voice cut through the silence, "And if you think Judge Chen recusing himself was shocking, wait until you see what Epps authorized, behind closed doors, using Chen as a proxy." Chief Judge Knox leaned forward slowly, her fingers clasped together. "Deputy Attorney General Leonard Epps is one of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the country. If you're wrong about this, Ms. Bondi," Pam met her gaze. "I'm not." Without breaking eye contact, she reached into her briefcase one last time and produced a small external hard drive. "This contains 2 hours of encrypted audio," she said. "Multiple conversations recorded between Judge Chen and Epps, one of them only 5 days ago. They discussed delaying proceedings, manipulating witness availability, and, in Epps' own words, making sure Bondi never gets close to the bench." She placed the hard drive on the table like a detonator. Knox's face darkened. "Is the voice authentication verified?" "By 2 independent forensic teams and 1 federal tech analyst. All sworn." At that moment, the DOJ representative in the courtroom, a suited man in his early 50s, stood up. "Your Honor, I request immediate possession of that drive for security processing." Pam turned her head calmly. "You'll get it, as soon as it's entered into the record and secured under court supervision. I don't trust anyone from your office until this goes public." Whispers exploded into full-on chatter. Judge Knox pounded the gavel. "Order. Or I will clear the courtroom." When it fell quiet, she exhaled and spoke carefully. "We are now in uncharted legal territory. Ms. Bondi, you've just accused the Deputy Attorney General and a sitting federal judge of coordinated judicial interference." Pam nodded. "And I have everything to prove it." Judge Knox paused, then looked directly at the clerk. "Seal the court. Notify the U.S. Marshals. And get me a secure line to the Attorney General." Bondi folded her arms. She knew what came next. As federal agents stepped into the room and sealed the exits, the courtroom transformed from a legal proceeding into a crisis command center. And Pam Bondi stood exactly where she intended to be. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The U.S. Marshals entered in pairs, 6 of them, clad in dark tactical uniforms, earpieces in, badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. No one moved. Even the press froze as Judge Knox gave the order that sent a chill through the entire courtroom. This courtroom is now under federal security lockdown. Pam Bondi remained perfectly still, hands at her sides, watching as the DOJ liaison was quietly approached by 2 marshals. He raised his hand slowly. "You can't be serious," he protested. "This is a DOJ internal matter." "No," Judge Knox cut in sharply. "This is now a matter of national legal integrity. You can call your supervisor from the hallway." He was escorted out. Pam turned slightly toward the gallery. "Some of you know what's been happening behind the scenes. Others are just now catching up. But what comes next will test whether this system actually works, or whether we've all just been pretending." One of the marshals approached the bench. "Chief Judge Knox, per protocol, will begin protective custody for the witness and secure the evidence for DOJ higher command. The AG has been briefed." Knox nodded gravely. "Very well. Escort Ms. Bondi to the secure chambers. She's now the key witness in an active federal investigation." Pam didn't blink. She gave a single nod and turned to follow the marshals, until one more thing stopped the room cold. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen, frowned, then looked up. "Judge Knox. I just got word, Epps is en route to D.C. But he's not going to DOJ headquarters." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Then where is he going?" Pam's answer hit like a hammer: "He's heading to the White House." Judge Knox stood frozen for a moment before responding. "The White House? Are you saying this goes that high?" Pam nodded grimly. "I didn't want to believe it either. But the documents, and the recordings, suggest coordination at levels that bypassed both the DOJ and the judiciary. Epps wasn't working alone. He was following someone's orders." Murmurs broke out again as the courtroom buzzed with speculation. Judge Knox turned to the marshals. "Escort Ms. Bondi to secure holding. And get me a liaison from the National Security Council. Now." As Pam followed the officers toward the back of the courtroom, one journalist shouted, "Pam! Are you saying someone inside the White House was involved in covering for Judge Chen?" Pam stopped at the door and looked over her shoulder. "I'm saying someone inside the White House hand-picked him for this exact case." Gasps. Audible this time. Back in chambers, Chief Judge Knox made a flurry of calls. Phones were ringing across agencies, each line more frantic than the last. Within 15 minutes, the courtroom was emptied of all but key legal and federal personnel. The hard drive had been sent to a secure forensic lab under U.S. Marshal Guard. The list of names Pam had submitted was already being cross-referenced. But there was one name not on that list. A name Pam had deliberately held back. As she sat in the secure witness chamber, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a private line, encrypted, one very few people had. She answered calmly. "I was expecting your call." The voice on the other end was cold, clipped, and filled with warning. "You've made your move, Bondi. You better know how this ends." Pam's reply was even colder. "Oh, I do. And you're going to be watching it from the inside of a Senate hearing room." The call ended with a sharp click, but Pam just stared at the dark screen, her jaw set. She had been threatened before. But not like this. Minutes later, the door to the secure witness chamber opened. Chief Judge Knox entered, followed by 2 senior federal attorneys and a grim-faced NSA representative. "We've reviewed the first portion of the audio," Knox said. "It's damning. There's no doubt Epps and Chen coordinated efforts to suppress evidence and tamper with witnesses." One of the DOJ attorneys added, "And if what you said about his trip to the White House is true, this could become the biggest legal scandal in modern political history." Pam stood. "It gets worse. There's one name I didn't put on that list." They all looked at her. She continued, slowly and clearly. "He was mentioned only once in the recordings. But that one mention was enough. Code name Helix. Internal DOJ memos match it to someone with direct, unrestricted access to the West Wing, and full clearance over DOJ appointments." The NSA rep narrowed his eyes. "You're talking about the Chief of Staff?" Pam nodded. "Yes. Conrad Hale. The man who controls the gate to the Oval Office." A heavy silence followed. Judge Knox was the first to speak. "You're sure?" "I've already confirmed it. Voice analysis. Access logs. Travel overlaps. Hale didn't just know, he designed the strategy to install judges like Chen in key districts. This wasn't about one case. It was about shaping outcomes for a generation." The NSA agent's voice turned sharp. "If that's true, we're no longer just dealing with corruption, we're looking at subversion of constitutional law." Pam stepped forward. "Then it's time the Constitution fought back." The words hung in the air like a war drum. Subversion of constitutional law. Pam Bondi turned toward the federal attorneys. "The only question now is, do you have the courage to act? Or will this get buried like the others?" Judge Knox answered first. "Not under my court. Not this time." The NSA agent nodded. "We're drafting an emergency referral to the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. If the Chief of Staff is involved, this triggers a national security protocol." One of the DOJ lawyers cleared his throat. "You do realize, Ms. Bondi, that if you proceed, you may never walk freely in D.C. again." Pam looked him dead in the eye. "Then I'll walk in front of every camera until the truth's too loud to ignore." Meanwhile, chaos had already begun to ripple through the Capitol. News outlets were getting fragments of the story: Bondi's surprise court appearance, Chen's sudden recusal, the explosive evidence. But no one yet knew the depth. Not yet. In an underground DOJ evidence vault, technicians reviewed the hard drive under 24-hour armed guard. Every passing second brought them closer to confirming everything Pam had alleged. And then, confirmation. The lead analyst turned to the supervising agent. "We have it. Not just coordination. We've got audio of Hale giving direct instructions to delay a whistleblower indictment, then placing a call to Epps saying, 'Our guy on the bench will handle it.' Within an hour, federal subpoenas were being prepared. Dozens of phones were tapped. Travel logs were frozen. A black SUV convoy rolled out toward the White House. And inside a private room just off the West Wing, Chief of Staff Conrad Hale picked up his phone and said one word: activate. The command was swift. Activate. Inside the West Wing, that single word triggered a long-buried protocol, one Hale had designed for emergencies where exposure was imminent. Phones were destroyed. Hard drives pulled. Communications rerouted through shadow channels. But it was too late. Pam Bondi had outmaneuvered them. As the SUV convoy approached the White House gates, federal agents already had live warrants signed by two judges. One was Judge Valerie Knox. The other was a previously uninvolved circuit judge, pulled in secretly to prevent interference. Pam's plan had anticipated Hale's playbook. In the secure courtroom annex, Pam watched the entire operation unfold via live DHS feed. She said nothing as she saw Hale escorted out of the West Wing in handcuffs, jaw tight, face expressionless. Judge Chen, meanwhile, was taken into custody from his home, just hours after offering his sudden recusal. His expression was different, broken, almost relieved. He knew the facade had shattered. By the end of the day, 10 federal officials had been named. 3 resigned. 2 turned whistleblower. Deputy Attorney General Leonard Epps, cornered by the recordings and a second cooperating witness, negotiated a plea deal, but only after confirming Hale's role as architect of the scheme. And Bondi? She stood before the cameras outside the courthouse that night, flanked by agents and legal advisors. Her voice was steady. This wasn't about politics. It was about power. And when power tries to operate in the dark, the law must bring the light. The press erupted with questions, but she offered only one final sentence before stepping away. Next time, they'll think twice before putting a puppet on the bench.